Voting in Europe, ins and outs. Peace of a peace summit, reality behind reality. Russian talks about peace are a bluff because the aggressor continues to destroy Ukrainian cities and energy. Good afternoon. These topics in more detail in today's weekly wrap-up on UATV English with me, Pavlo Shtermach, as usual breaking hard truths in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. The European elections are taking place from Thursday. If you are an EU citizen, you have the right to vote in these elections, together with around 360 million Europeans. And your vote matters. You are part of Europe and what it represents, and your vote will help shape and nurture our common future. In the European Union, democracy may seem obvious to us today, but this has not always been the case. Not so long ago, millions of Europeans lived through tough times when they could not vote or even speak up freely. The 2024 European Parliament elections will see a major shift to the right in many countries, with populist radical right parties gaining votes and seats across the EU, and centre-left and green parties losing their voters and seats. Anti-European populists are likely to top the polls in 9 member states like Austria, Belgium, the Czech Republic, France, Hungary, Italy and the Netherlands, also Poland and Slovakia, and come second or third in a further 9 countries like Bulgaria, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Portugal, Romania, Spain and Sweden. According to many forecasts, almost half of the seats will be held by members of European Parliament outside the super grand coalition of the 3 centrist groups. Inside the European Parliament, a populist right coalition of Christian Democrats, Conservatives and radical right MPs could emerge with a majority for the first time. This sharp right turn is likely to have significant consequences for European-level policies, which will affect the foreign policy choices that the EU can make, particularly on environmental issues, where the new majority is likely to oppose ambitious EU action to tackle climate change. Indeed, far-right parties are becoming increasingly dominant in national settings across many EU capitals. Well, of course, they are far right after all. While the Parliament is not the most significant EU institution when it comes to foreign policy, the way in which the political groups align after the elections and the impact that these elections have on national debates in member states will have significant implications for the European Commission's and Council's ability to make foreign policy choices. So what to expect? Anything. I mean it. After all, that's what freedom costs. The first peace summit for Ukraine should become a platform of inspiration for the future peace process. The summit for Ukraine will be held on June 15th and 16th following the January agreement between the presidents of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the president of the Swiss Confederation, Viola Amherd. The parties have chosen Bergenstock, located near the Swiss city of Lucerne, as their venue. It is right to mention that China will not attend Ukrainian peace conference in Switzerland next month because it does not meet its expectations. Well, are these expectations of China or expectations of Xi Jinping himself? I guess we'll never know. This way or the other, the organization of the summit is the result of coordinated efforts of the Ukrainian and Swiss sides that is clear. It will be attended by state leaders and heads of governments from around the globe. The founding principles of the event were developed and agreed upon during a series of international meetings of political and national security advisors, initiated by the office of the President of Ukraine. As for the summit, we believe that it is only right to get stronger on the battlefield, and it depends on us, our production and our partners. It is equally right to get stronger diplomatically. We do not want any negotiation formats or peace formulas to be imposed on us by countries that are not here today, not at war. It is very important for the initiative to come only from Ukraine. It is what Zelensky said. To force Russia to peace. Yes, you heard me right, as Russia wants no peace, but respite, and just long-lasting peace is no goal for Russia. In contrary, Russia wants war. More than 100 countries have accepted its invitation to the summit to discuss provision of a peace plan outlined by President Zelensky to end the full-scale Russian invasion that began in February 2022. Russia, with whom China has close ties, has not been invited to participate in a June 15th and 16th meeting. So, what is important, the peace summit will not seek a path to peace. Oh, sorry, did I sound nonsense? The agenda includes these issues. The 3 of them: nuclear security, food security, and the release of prisoners of war. As the Swiss explain, the narrow choice was made to facilitate consensus. Well, we see what happens next. Today, Ukrainian cities resemble London, Dresden, or even Hiroshima during the Second World War, and the number of destroyed buildings is as if every building in Manhattan was destroyed 4 times in a row. The journalists of the New York Times write about that. Daily reports of devastating Russian strikes in Ukraine do not give an idea of the level of destruction of our Ukrainian cities. Journalists of the New York Times, using satellite images and computer technology, investigated every house in Ukraine that was destroyed. Even if the war ends tomorrow, in many places there will be nothing to return to. That's the main message. A team of New York Times journalists, together with scientists, analyzed those data from radar satellites and concluded that Ukraine lost approximately 210,000 buildings located along the front line, which is about 1,000 kilometers long, where the losses are the greatest, but also the structures in the rear. They explain that they undertook this task because it is impossible to comprehend the extent of the destruction that Ukraine has suffered during the last 2 years of a large-scale war. From news reports, for years, the Russians used an aggressive style of warfare, destroying cities like Rubizhne and seizing its ruins. More than 900 schools, hospitals, churches, and other institutions were destroyed or damaged in Ukraine, New York Times writes. Despite the fact that the Geneva Conventions are directly supposed to protect such objects, among the large cities, Mariupol was the most destroyed. 18 hospitals, 34 religious buildings, and 237 schools were destroyed only there. And small towns, for example, like Mariinka, which suffered destruction back in 2014, were almost completely destroyed after the 2022 invasion. Experts say that even the published figures are conservative estimate because they didn't have enough data about Crimea or the extent of destruction in western Ukraine. In addition, they remind us that the destruction continues every day. This is the Russian way of waging war, the journalists say. For decades, the Russians have used an aggressive style of war, leveled a city like Rubizhne and captured its ruins. A similar fate befell to Zaporizhia region, Kherson, Oleshki, and Novokakhovka in the south of Ukraine. Kharkiv, Sumy, and Vovchansk in the north suffered too significant destruction. The Russians are bombing cities in northeastern Ukraine so fiercely that they seem to be erasing the streets. According to estimates by the World Bank, the European Commission, and the United Nations, as of December 31st, 2023, the total cost of reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine is $486 billion over the next decade. But journalists say that not all losses are calculated in dollars. In some cities of eastern Ukraine, the life of several generations, which lasted in this place for about 200 years, ended. And I will note that these challenges are not ending, but are only intensifying. And any statements by anyone from the Kremlin about their readiness to conduct peace are just a bluff, to accumulate new missiles and glide bombs. And it is time for more on UATV English. You asked hard questions and we answer them in easy terms. This week, the question asked by our dear follower, Sir Jack. And that question sounds like, why isn't anyone talking about the chance of nuclear war becoming more likely every day? So we talk about it. First of all, no one is talking about a nuclear war because this is exactly what the Kremlin wants to. Moscow is trying to intimidate other countries with possible nuclear strikes in order to reduce support for Ukraine. To some extent, they even succeed in this because permission to strike on Russian territory was very difficult for our Western partners. Even now, this permission has its own restrictions, which of course Ukraine will comply with. However, no one wants a nuclear war. No one. Even Putin. He said on Friday, and I quote, "We never said we were ready to push the nuclear button." Of course, these are just words again, because Russian propagandists on the main TV channels of Russia promised nuclear annihilation on Berlin, London, and Washington. Or you can now open the official Telegram channel of the former president of Russia and the deputy chairman of the Security Council, Medvedev, and count how many times there are mentions of nuclear ash, nuclear strikes, and generally erasing everything into dust. By the way, I have a little guess that I hope is wrong, but it is very likely that Russia is preparing provocations at the captured Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. As always. And now the information whitewashing is just continuing. Returning to the topic of nuclear war, it seems to me that Putin now spoke about the nuclear button because he realized that his blackmail failed. The taboo on strikes on Russian territory has been lifted. It cannot be returned back. And maybe Putin realized that he made a mistake and is trying to return the status quo of April this year. but it will never be like that again. Neither at the beginning of the year nor in January 2022, it will no longer be the same as it was in 2014, before the start of the war against Ukraine. Although, of course, there is a probability that there will be only a nuclear war and nuclear winter. It always is. But, the only people who are not afraid of them are the Ukrainians. Do you know why? Because we were already expecting tactical nuclear strikes in 2022, when we were recapturing Kharkiv Oblast and Kherson Oblast. At that time, the Kremlin actively promoted this topic of a nuclear war in the media in order to prevent our partners from breaching Russian defenses. As you can see, it didn't work then. And so any talk of nuclear war is just talk. And when there are no more conversations, then humanity will not have much longer to live. That seems to be all for tonight and for this week. For news on Ukraine, stay with Ukraine. Next week, my colleagues on UATV English will break more hard truths to the easiest of terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Thank you for being with us. Please like, subscribe, and share. Your voice and support matters. It helps to promote our Ukrainian voice worldwide. Stay safe and tuned for more, and stand with Ukraine. Goodbye.